Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the Rabbit Hole stage, and I'm so glad you all are here. We have an amazing speaker right now. Jay Hogan is giving a talk today about the intersection of hair and its importance to racism and sexism, ageism, classism, politics, and religion. And Jay will be exploring how hair has shaped our lives and our physical bodies. And I'm so excited to hear Jay speak today. So let's just open it up. Take it away, Jay.
Thanks, Jim. Are you glad to be at the fair today? We waited so long, right, for this to come back. And in anticipation of our long-awaited fair, I decided I was going to stop cutting and trimming mine for a while, just being that this is a hippie festival with lots and lots of amazing hair. So my first roommate was a cosmetologist, and she told me that there's two things that matter the most about how you look to everybody else. Number one is your eyes. I don't mean your eyeballs, I mean everything that's in between your eyebrows and your cheekbones with your nose in between. This is what people look at and recognize you by. Number two is your hair. We all have it or not, and it matters. So we're here at this hippie fest, and what's one of the words that most describes hippies? Hair, hairy hippies, long-haired hippies. And even though we're all equal here, some of us have good hair, right? Friend, I know you have good hair, and some of us less so, but it's okay.
I can't grow a beard.
So one of the fun things about being at the fair is the people watching, right? Just the most amazing people and the most amazing hair. And a lot of the hippies with great hair show it. Why not? And many of us who don't fake it. You know, there's all kinds of things you can do with your hair. You can put chemicals on it and henna, and you can style it. You can even do extensions and wigs. I think I saw some wigs earlier today. There's a place you won't see on the map of the country fair that I have an affinity for because I got to name it, and it's called Wigland, and it's where the parade people dress up. You may have noticed that they fake some of their hair, right? And faking hair is not just on top of our head. People do that with eyelashes, eyebrows, tattoos on their face. Hair is really important, in being humans. There's also the option to skip it. You can shave it. Some people do that. Usually men, some women even. You can also hide it. Actually, I'm hiding from the sun under this, but it is convenient on what we call bad hair days as well. So when I was in college, I was really interested in anthropology. I took a lot of anthropology classes. And usually when we talk about anthropology, we think cultural anthropology, just how human culture is all over the world. And there's another branch of anthropology called linguistics. That's what I majored in. The third branch of anthropology is called physical anthropology. We don't hear about physical anthropology very much. It's the study of human variation, all the physical variation that occurs in people. And one of the things I remember my physical anthropology professor explaining was the concept of race. He says race is not actually scientifically real. There's been this notion for a few hundred years that humans can be all color-coded into 5 or so categories, and you're either, this color, that color, that color. And he says that scientifically that's not valid. Now, racism, the prejudice against people based on race certainly is. So one of the things they look at, with humans is just they measure things, like how long's your nose, how prominent is your nose, how, just everything that they can measure about you, how dense are the hairs on your head. My brother put himself through school as a clothing model. He was just the right height and had really good looks. And he worked for an ad agency, and they told him, well, if you really want to make it big time, you'll need to get a nose job. He has a nose like mine, but they said it's too wide here to be a big time model. You know, this is really good for my singing voice maybe, but you know, anyway, when it comes to hair, there's something that we all have, which is pigment in it, unless you're albino or getting older like me. And you either have dark pigment called eumelanin, spelled like Eugene. There's two kinds, a very dark kind that's black and a kind that's not as dark, that's more brown. And then there's pheomelanin, which is red pigment. Only about 1% of humans have red hair, but I was surprised to learn that about 1/3 or more of humans produce red pigment. You just don't see it because they have so much dark melanin that it obscures it. But that's why you see a lot of people who have, say, dark brown hair, definitely with auburn highlights. You know, we have names like chestnut, you know, and then there's strawberry blonde. If you have less and less of the pigment, you're blonde. And I was intrigued to learn that in Japan, a culture I greatly admire, that has a lot of emphasis on conformity. And the people there, almost all of them have straight black hair, that for the Japanese who have slightly reddish undertones in their hair, that students will be sent home from school and required to dye their hair black like every few weeks, which struck me as a profound kind of racism when you figure that, you know, you're born with a certain kind of hair, and yet it's not okay in the school for the children. There also is prejudice against people with red hair. People with red hair are singled out, bullied. The whole thing of gingerism, talking about isms. But when I think about prejudice with hair, there's nothing that stands out more than prejudice towards people with afro-textured hair. Your hair grows out kind of in a circular cross-section, at least if it's straight. And if the cross-section is oval, it gets wavy. And as it gets narrower, it gets more tightly coiled and even kinky. And have any of you seen the movie Good Hair that Chris Rock? If you're interested in this topic of good hair, especially for African Americans, it's an entertaining movie, and he really explores this, especially the industry of, you know, things like straightening hair. When I talked about faking hair, I mean it's okay to do whatever you want with your hair. I don't mean that it's fake, but but putting harsh chemicals on your hair to straighten it if it's not straight, or to perm it curly if it is straight already. It's funny how it goes in both directions. But especially in our country, African American children suffer in the schools often because of the hair issues, and ways that are suitable for them to style and wear their hair are not acceptable to the school administrators. But that's changing. Have any of you heard of the Crown Act? I think it's happening in state legislatures around the country where they are having to codify into law that you are allowed to do these hairstyles, the Bantu knots and the beads and the dreadlocks and the weaves, and yeah. So one of the things that intrigued me reading up on hair, looking around the world, is that there is a sort of basic underlying rule for all cultures, or almost all cultures, and that is that men and women have different hairdos available to them. There's very few cultures where men and women wear their hair the same. I think there's a couple tribes in the Amazon where they just do the same thing with their hair. It occurred to me that one other place where that's the case is with hippies. That hippie men and women can wear their hair. I mean, to a degree, at least, certain styles. But you all know what the effect is when a woman wears her hair cut like a man. It's a different look. And you certainly know what it looks like when a man styles his hair. I mean, Risk of Change is giving us plenty of examples, each parade of, the humor and silliness that we ascribe to that. Another thing about gender and hair is the whole thing of long hair on men. A person from my past, very dear to me in Ohio, when he was in high school, he started to let his hair grow, and he got suspended for it. And his mother's response was to sue. I think not just the school, I think the state of Ohio. And they won. Winning the right for Ohio's high school students to wear their hair long. I mean, maybe they set other limits. So I was really disappointed a year or so ago to read that the exact same thing just played out recently in Texas, only the students didn't win. But, it is Texas, right? So there's all these things we call isms. Mentioned racism, sexism, ageism, classism. There's all these categories of ways that we come up with when we look at somebody. And of course, because we have noble values here, right? We're not racist or sexist or ageist, right? Well, I would like to admit that in reading a lot of articles on this topic, I certainly found articles where racism was described as something white people do to black people, sexism something men do to women, ageism is what employers do to seniors. But I take a much broader view of what that means, because I think that everybody's really racist and sexist and ageist. You categorize, you recognize somebody's old or their gender or whatever it is, or their size. And when they've done studies about this with the brain, how long does it take for you to make a judgment that you think somebody is beautiful or whatever? It's about 1/100th of a second. That's how fast your brain has just put that person into a category. And then, of course, your neocortex decides what you're going to say or how you're going to treat that person. And so what I want to offer to each of us is to take a step back and, admire the beautiful people here today. Just take in all the amazing examples of hair and what you can do with it, and the gifts that they were given, and how they're showing it, flaunting it, sharing it, or hiding it, whatever suits them, it's all okay. But to recognize that our eyes and our mind make judgments, and it's up to you to decide. Are you going to respond the way you've been conditioned? And to just honestly look at that with, especially, mostly when I look out at people, I just marvel at their beauty. But every now and then in life, I'll think, oh, wow, that person's kind of whatever. And it makes me take a step back and okay, what's going on? Just really do some self-examination. Or am I just having a bad day? Which, is usually the case for something like that. So I'm hoping if you have questions, we can talk about this a little more, but I want to mainly share with you a quote I ran across from Hillary Clinton. Whether you're a fan of hers or not, she's a remarkable person in American history, First Lady for 8 years, a U.S. Senator, Secretary of State. And of course, every time she was in the evening news, what did people want to talk about? Her hair, right? So she was once asked to go to the Yale Law School to give the commencement address for the law school. She goes up to the podium, and this is what she says. The most important thing I have to say to you today is that hair matters. Your hair will send significant messages to those around you. What hopes and dreams you have for the world, but more, what hopes and dreams you have for your hair. Pay attention to your hair. because everybody else will. Have you been to Wigland? Hatland, okay, okay.
Can you go to Wigland now?
Um,
Can you draw us a secret map?
you would need an escort, but I'll take you there. It's in Energy Park, or environs, and they have lots of colorful ones in every natural and unnatural color. So, hey, blessings. So, do you have any hair stories?
Well, I was thinking just the other day, and because I was thinking about you, I was like, oh, I gotta find out when Jay's gonna be talking, because you mentioned that you were gonna talk on hair. And the first thing that came into my head was a line from hair.
Okay.
And it's always just struck me. It says, hair, hallelujah, I adore it. Wait, hair like Jesus wore it, hallelujah, I adore it. Hallelujah, Mary loved her son, why don't my mama love me hair?
Wow.
And yeah, it just really kept ringing in because it struck me as the significance of just the hair, but all these deeper things that are wrapped around it, interwoven with it, literally and figuratively, and culturally, societally. Yeah, it was just the first thing that popped in my head, and I thought, oh, I'm really excited to go here. There's
Good.
so much in there.
Hair is very loaded.
Yeah.
A lot of us adults, we settle into a hairdo that we kind of live with. Like, this is what works for me. But an interesting thing about hair is you can change it up. You can have fun with it.
You still have some.
Right. And then one of the things that's when we're talking about hair, we're largely thinking of the hair on our head. But what about eyebrows? I could do a whole talk on eyebrows. And again, when you hear the phrase natural hair movement these days, often they're talking about black women going natural with their Afro-textured hair. But really, a lot of what you see here today is the natural hair movement. It's the hippies going back to the beatniks, the naturist movement before that. That what does your hair do naturally, and embrace it. Now, this is a new look for me this year. Letting the beard go. I make house calls for a living, so I've been tending to keep my hair kind of tidy and trim. But it just feels right. I think I'm going to keep it. Well, I work in the music industry in Oregon, so nobody's going to really care too much. But did you play with your hair, style-wise, in the past?
Thinking about, for me, it's interesting that over the years, I feel like I've been, in a marriage or with the same person for many years, and I worked at the same, had the same kind of occupation, worked the same employer for years, and I didn't feel like any of that needed to change or wanted to change it. But I felt like, every once in a while, I feel like I just need some kind of change. So I would cut my hair off, get it short. Or I would just completely different hairstyle once in a while. But I can always go back to something else. But that's kind of the place where I feel like
Sure. Todd, I know you have a hair story. I wondered if you would maybe share it about your last haircut. He was going to Texas to visit his relatives in a station wagon. It's Woodstock, and they're making him get a crew cut to go to Texas. So growing my hair long was kind of an act of rebellion early on, but I just went back and forth thinking I didn't have good hair. But now that I've let my freak flag fly, I think I'm going to keep it.
Well, you know, and like you said, these things they all go back and forth the other way. Because when I had my hair a lot longer, I could say, yeah, if you have it, and I had this kind of ridiculous hair. And so for me, after having it really long for a while, it was like kind of an act of rebellion to cut it off. Because there was all these expectations wrapped up in this epic hair. And I had it almost even offended some. You know? Well, you're not allowed to do that. It's special hair. You can't waste it. So it kind of, it goes interesting ways.
You realize how much money people spend on hair.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, billions and billions of dollars just in hair care. Then there's this whole thing of selling hair. I encourage you, look online for hair for sale. You'll be amazed. You can find it in any color. It's pretty amazing. A lot of human hair comes from India because the people there typically have great hair, nice, thick, long hair. And for religious reasons, many of them cut it off several times in their life. So the temples acquire vast amount of hair that are then available on the market for those of us who want extensions and to be playful with it. There's hair transplants. There's just so many things that people do to get the good hair. And then there are some people who lose hair. It was in the news, if you follow that sort of thing, about what's the word? Alopecia. Thank you. And I have a friend who has alopecia, and she got really tired of having to color in her missing eyebrows all the time, and she finally opted to get tattooed. Just take care of that. My brother and I, you would think we'd have identical eyebrows because they're genetic. I've never actually asked him, but I have assumed that he just typically plucks all those big eyebrow hairs that come in, unlike me, who just pushes them out of the way. Actually, I had a young kid once ask me, or he said, you need to trim your eyebrows. And I said, well, actually I do, I just trim them long. But there's a thing about eyebrows I've noticed in recent years. American men are getting into manscaping. Do you know that word? The portmanteau between man and landscaping. And it's not just their eyebrows, it's all over. And I know that from the gym. Some guys don't want the hair on the back. They use the wax treatments, and then there's the whole thing for women having body hair, and all the attitudes. That's something else you can see here. Women who are natural, as far as legs, armpits, faces too, and pushing boundaries for how people can be. Yeah.
That's a really important thing. I have felt that a lot myself because I cannot shave because I just break out in rashes. I've had people be disgusted at the beach. They see, oh, I've got armpit hair. Disgusting. I think it's a terrible thing, but you have to be a certain way. You have to have shave.
But it's a very common standard in societies around the world. And expectations. But we here at the fair, we're trying to transform our culture in healthy, magical ways. And a big part of that is just our own awareness in how we treat other people. We're all free to make our own decisions, especially the ones about style and what you want to do with your hair. But you pay a price in how, just like Hillary said, everyone's paying attention to your hair. And she didn't, I don't think she just means this hair. One of the things, I mentioned how race isn't scientifically real. Racism is. For myself, I've always hated having to check those 5 color-coded boxes. I guess they want me to say white. What are they asking me? My Irish ancestors weren't considered white when they came to America. And so when I would have a chance to put other, I would just write in Irish. I was once in South India, and a stranger came up to me, a Tamil man my age, and he pointed at me with a smile on his face, and he said, "You are Irish." I said, "Yeah, yeah." So I was delighted that the most recent time I had to identify myself by race, it had 118 options, and one of them was Irish. It's like they're figuring out that, anybody else? Mm-hmm.
So I think the idea of how people cut their hair to change their looks and therefore change how people look at it. I think I'm pretty interested in how people will go to a beauty salon or a barber shop for a makeover. And they totally change their hairstyle to look like somebody else in a way. And I'm curious about when they change it that much, is it trying to search for their identity, trying to find out who I really am because I look good this way? Or do they disguise themselves in some way because they want to look like someone else, maybe? I think the one interesting part that you mentioned about in the 60s, when black people had afro hairstyles, that was one of the interesting things that really, that was like their badge of honor. That identified them as somebody specifically. And that was one of the common male and female. Both had the same
It's true. The fros were for both sexes.
wearing the same hat.
Now, I remember the 60s, and I remember something about the fros, and that they were almost always very neatly picked out. They were very uniform. And in recent years, I've been noticing a lot of African Americans with a different look, where their hair is more mounded, for want of a better word. Yeah, and so I was having dinner with a black fellow, and at first I thought, oh, Jay, don't ask him a question about black hair like that. I just felt really sensitive about that. But I thought he's not going to be offended, so I asked him, like, is there a word for what I'm observing to describe the style? I figured there must be a word. And he didn't know of any, although he gave me an important clue. He told me there are certain styling sponges with different size holes depending on the look you're going for. And I searched and searched online, and I finally found that, well, there is a word. It's called natural. And the variation you see is the natural variation that people have in their hair. And I think it's beautiful. It reminds me of like the Buddhist sculptures where the hair has that kind of texture about it. Our hair changes too as we age. And I didn't really talk much about ageism, but some of you when you were little, you were towheads, and then your hair kind of turned a different color, and then it started getting white or silver if you're old enough. And people treat you differently. When my beard turned white, it was over about the space of one driver's license. And as soon as it happened, it's like, wow, strangers are holding doors for me, and they're deferring to me in the checkout line. Like, this is cool. But I have to admit, in letting my beard grow out this year, I realized that whatever this thing is called white privilege, which is real, all over the world, if you travel, you're able to travel more freely than people who aren't perceived as white. When a white guy does this with his face, he loses some of his white privilege. I mean, it's true. And think about if I were to dread my hair with dreadlocks. Oh, people with dreadlocks really lose a considerable amount. Yes, it's true.
Sorry for being late.
Oh, no, glad to see you.
So I came here because in my freshman year in college, I was in a campus music theater of hair, and that's kind of I kind of thought there was a connection there. But at the time, I had this big auburn jufros, just these big loose curls, and I loved it. I kept it like that. But my son now has that kind of hair, except his are like really tight, kinky.
What color did it come in?
His came in blonde, like dirty blonde, a lot lighter than mine and a lot kinkier than mine was. But yeah, my hair wish I'd had that hair again, but I can enjoy it vicariously through my son. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there is ageism, and there's almost in some social situations, I almost feel like I've become invisible because of my age. Invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then occasionally
not always
there are
a bad
these
thing.
wonderful. I'm sorry, what's that?
Sorry, I said that's not always a bad thing. You can just kind of like,
Well, that's true too.
yeah.
But I've noticed there are a lot of young people who are interested in talking to older people and getting some history. Like, yeah, how did we get to this state that we're in right now? And it goes both ways.
I've got a hair story. So I have really long hair, and I've always wanted to keep it long. And I went to Scotland in undergrad, and I found myself in a pub, and I get a beer, and I'm sitting there, and then I kind of hear this guy come up behind me, and he just grabs my hair and just tries to pull on it, and he's just drunk as a skunk. And then he immediately is horrified, and it's like, I just told my mates, I bet them that you were wearing a wig.
Because you had such good hair?
Because I had this amazing hair, and I just looked at him, and I was like, what in the hell are you thinking? And then he immediately just became so ashamed of what he just did, and bought me drinks all night.
Oh. I'm glad it had a happy ending there. One of the things about having survived the pandemic thus far, I feel like I'm still assessing, the impact on me personally and probably our society as well, is that for a lot of people who have been coloring their hair as they got older and more gray hair, it was just the obvious time to go natural. And so I have to admit I'm a proponent of the natural hair movement. It's like, what does your hair do naturally? It's okay if you want to do something else with it, but natural is good.
What are you trying to say? I'm just kidding.
What?
I said, what are you trying to say?
I'm saying to be yourself and make yourself happy. And have fun. Have fun with your hair. And you can change it around every month or so.
For me, I see people with long hair and I think it's beautiful, but for me personally, it gets to a certain length and then I always want to have to put it in a ponytail, or it's just a lot to take care of, and I just will never have it real long.
Long hair can be a lot of work. I don't know if you realize this, but how long your hair grows is another part of the genetics that you inherited from your parents and grandparents. This is all my hair does in the back. It does not grow longer. I'd grown it out for years, and I finally thought, well, I'm going to cut off my ponytail. It was this little thing. I glued it onto one of those troll dolls. Well, thank you all. Have fun today, admiring all the beautiful people out there, and definitely check out their hairdos.
Don't pull on it.
Yes, be respectful to everybody, and especially, pay attention to the attitudes and the things when you encounter people who are different from you. Just check in and realize that we all have those isms in us. We're conditioned to, and do something good about it. Okay. Thank you all.